and thank you for attending. Sorry, we're just recording the event. So I'm going to go through go through welcome and introductions, and also go through some housekeeping before we start. So just to also, go through some housekeeping before we start. So we just ask that you mute yourself while the presenters are presenting. And then also it would be great if you could type your name and organization in the chat room, because it's nice to get to know everybody and know who's here. When we have Q&As, if you can raise your hand to speak, and then we will address your questions and comments. So again, put all your question and comments in the chat, and people will be given an opportunity to actually voice their comments as well. So I'm just going to give a run through of what the session will be about. So we're going to have a Mentimeter and an icebreaker after the session. Then we're going to start on the presentations. So I'll be presenting on communication VCA, who, what, and how. Then our next presenter will be Bob Aston from ALIN, and he will be presenting on climate change, communication policy, and legal framework in Kenya. Then we have Professor Kioko Ireri, and he'll be covering the basics of news writing, feature writing, and story framing. Then we're going to go into a very short body break of about 5 minutes. And when we come back, we'll go into the next presentation, which will be done by Nyakerario Omari about fact-checking and climate change. We have another speaker from ThinkOut, which is Simon Wachira. And then we're going to do another Mentimeter to get your feedback and comments about the session. So I'm going to just go into the Mentimeter now, and we're going to do that for about 2 or 3 minutes. So I'm going to just read the screen. The Mentimeter link should be shared now in the chat. So if you go into the chat and follow the link, and we will get to the Mentimeter. Okay, so hopefully you'll be able to see the Mentimeter slide. And yeah, so if you had a superpower, what would it be? So it'd be great if you can put your superpower in there in a little text box, if you can, and then we'll see the results. Now that's an interesting one, teleporting and invisibility. Ah, invincibility, that would be a nice one to have. Okay. All right. Okay, nothing else coming through. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for your inputs. Those are quite interesting. Oh, here's another one. Fun. Yeah, that's also a great element to add to one's life, isn't it? A dragon. Wow. Okay. Okay, great. Oh, here's another one coming in. Resilience, nice. Yeah, so feel free to add your superpower in there. We still have about a minute left to add to this, but it is great to see all the comments that are coming through. Okay, great. Thank you so much. I think we can end the Mentimeter here and go into an airbender. Okay, so we're going to go into our presentations. So great. Thank you everybody for adding your superpower. So now I'm going to go into the presentation on communication within VCA. So this will give a broad indication of how VCA is done, or how communication is done within VCA. And what does it actually mean? So communication can be, talking to each other, exchanging knowledge and information, and aligning our key messages so we can all speak with one voice, and also ensuring that our messages reach the right audience to ensure that voices are being heard. So this is in a brief what VCA stands for, or what we'd like to do within VCA in terms of communication. And VCA has a communications task force that supports the alliance, regional teams and local partners in terms of supporting the program implementation with strategic communication. We also advise and guide on how to position and communicate about the program. And we also work on aligning the communications messages and outputs within VCA. And this is the list of who makes up the communications task force. So you see there's about 8 of us, and there's a representative from each of the alliance members. So more on what we do. So we provide guidance to the regional teams on how communication can go about within the VCA program and about the program. And these can also include tailor-made training or learning sessions on specific topics. So all the big topics about climate justice, climate finance, media engagement, advocacy, and so forth. Then we also work to gather input from the regional teams so that we can improve and align on communication materials and activities. One of the other tasks that the communication has worked on is providing communication tools and support with the dissemination of the information or outputs. And these can be including news stories, blogs, articles, papers, podcasts, etc. So here's a list of some of the tools that we have developed from the Comms Task Force. And these include the branding guidelines, which gives an overview or guideline on how the logos are being used, the brandings in terms of the fonts, the VCA colors, types of photos to use in outputs, and also the type of languages that we use within VCA. Then we also have the Twitter and LinkedIn platforms where we can share other social media that's coming out of the various alliance members and partners. And we also have a YouTube channel where we showcase our videos. A website has also been developed where resources are uploaded, news articles, blogs, and videos, as well as a way of also sharing information coming out of VCA. Then we also have done some reporting templates or templates that can be used, for example, Word reports, PowerPoints, social media card templates as well. And these are available within the Alliance. Then we've also got our storing briefing templates and storing script templates. And what that is used for is to provide stories coming out of the regions and local partners. These can be stories of change or video stories that can be amplified outside of VCA. So how do you connect and share within or from the Comms Task Force and with the Comms Task Force? So SSM provides a link to the Comms Task Force where we actually visible and present in all the regions or the VCA regions. And we specialize as knowledge management and brokering, and also a communications alliance partner. So what we do is we work with regional teams and local partners to support them in forming communications task forces, develop communication strategies and knowledge management strategies, and also to see what communication needs arise out of the regions. developments in determining how task force can support. State learning sessions so that we can provide opportunities for feedback and learning between Alliance members and regional team members and local partners as well. And how we do this, we share and disseminate our stories through our social media platforms. We also have a bi-monthly newsletter which goes out and information on what's happening within VCA in terms of publications that has been produced, resources, news articles, blogs, and key highlights that have come out. So who to reach out to? So if you have any articles that you'd like to go into the newsletter, stories that could go on the website, any articles, you could reach out to myself and my colleague Merit from HIVAS, who is actually the focal point on the communications task force. So some of the highlights that have come out of the task force, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, is the Voices in Action bi-monthly newsletter. We've also working on putting together video model stories. And we're working on 7, which is one from each of the regions that VCA is active in. And the video stories feature a story of just climate action, which is told by a local hero or local protagonist. And what the aim of that is to amplify or for them to express what their climate challenges are, what is the local solutions, and what they call to action. You know, what is the message that they want to give to the outside world that is targeted at youth, other activists, local politicians, governments, municipalities, so that people are made aware of what is happening and how within the regions and how they are affected by climate change. We aim for these videos or these stories to be authentic as possible, and it can be told in the protagonist's local language. And these videos actually have subtitles as well, so that they are made accessible to the broad range of people who are watching them. So some of the stories, video stories that we have produced already is one from Brazil. We've done one from Paraguay. Tunisia video is currently in progress and hoping to finalize that soon. And then Indonesia, Zambia, and Bolivia are currently in discussion. We've actually launched the first video, which is on last week. And the aim of this is also to showcase them at COP, as we find that that's quite a nice event and platform to get the videos out there and for people to watch. So what are we currently doing? Currently, we're working on COP27 and preparing social media and comms toolkits for this event. We've drawn out a comms plan, which gives us an outline of the events that VCA will be present in at COP, and also our local and our alliance members as well and partners. We've also published a COP27 newsletter, which also showcases and gives gives little outline of what the events are about. We're also busy developing social media cards so that these can be shared on our social media platforms and continue gaining interest in what we are doing at COP. And then part of that will also be tweeting about them, putting them on our LinkedIn profile in the run-up to COP, and doing live tweets during COP. So, given that, I would like to just go through some Q&A. As after each presentation, we'll have a few minutes to for you to provide any feedback or for you to pose any questions regarding the presentation. So I'll leave the floor open to you as participants, and if you have anything, please share your questions in the chat, and we'll try to address as many as possible. Okay, I must have given a very good presentation because I don't see any questions or comments coming through. As I said, feel free to raise anything, but also feel free if you think of anything or anything comes up during the other presentations, also please forward them through the chat, and we'll also try to address them as the event goes on. So what I'd like to do now, if there's nothing coming through, is then hand over to my colleague Bob Aston from ALIN, and he will be giving his presentation on climate change, communication, policy and legal framework in Kenya. So Bob, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Karen. So I have a short presentation around climate change policy and legal framework in Kenya, but specifically touching on communication and also on public awareness.
Okay.
Karen, you can allow screen sharing.
Okay, let me just see.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, let me know if that is working for you now.
Yes, that's okay. So I think for us in Kenya, one of the most important policies or strategies in Kenya, particularly when it comes to climate change communication, is the National Climate Change Response Strategy. So this was in 2010, and it's actually the first legal document done by Kenya in regards to climate change. But what's key and important on the National Climate Change Response Strategy is that first it calls for the development of appropriate models of communication that will serve to transmit and also disseminate information on climate change. So the response strategy, besides calling for the integration or mainstreaming of climate change into the planning processes, mainly also talks about developing appropriate models for communication. It also calls for a focused awareness campaign that mainly simplifies the science and impacts of climate change in a language that is understandable by all segments. This mainly in terms of developing context-specific climate information. Then other aspect climate change calls that will have climate when it change information, and when it's actually documenting and disseminating climate change information, the national climate change response is key in terms of informing communication and also awareness creation in regards to climate change in Kenya. The next one, which is also key in terms of communication, and I think for most of us, is the Climate Change Act 2016. So the Act 2016 established various structures, but for us specifically when it comes to communication, is key is the role of the Climate Change Directorate, because the Climate Change Directorate is among the various structures established under the Climate Change Act 2016. But key for us is that the Act obligates the Climate Change Directorate to serve as the National Knowledge and Information Management Center for collecting, verifying, refining, and also disseminating knowledge and information on climate change. And so when you're talking about climate change communication, the Climate Change Act is key in terms of working with the Climate Change Directorate, specifically when it comes to disseminating, documenting, and also disseminating climate change information. Then when you also go to Section 8 of the Act, it first obligates the Cabinet Secretary responsible for climate change affairs in Kenya to implement a national gender and intergenerational responsive public education and awareness strategy. This strategy is actually developed when Kenya was doing the second annual climate change action plan for 2018-2022. But challenge in Kenya is normally the implementation bit. And so even right now, as Kenya is doing the third generation the third National Climate Change Action Plan for 2023-2027, Still, the aspect of developing national and intergenerational responsive public education and awareness strategy will still be there. And so it's still an important aspect, of, particularly for VCA, to see how we can be able to influence and also inform the development of the intergenerational responsive and public education and awareness strategy. So the Climate Change Act is key when it comes to informing climate change communication in Kenya, but at the same time, generally, even in terms of public participation on climate change, and also public participation and also public awareness when it comes to climate change information in Kenya. When you look at, for example, the National Climate Change Framework Policy, it's key. For instance, the National Climate Change Framework Policy mainly talks about the responsibility of the national government to facilitate setting up of a climate change information hubs by county governments. And that's why, for instance, at the national level, we have the National Climate Change Resource Center, which is located at Dagoretti Corner. That's at the Kenya Meteorological Department. And mainly the resource center is supposed to be, or is, a one-stop shop of climate change information in Kenya. And so it's supposed to link various actors working on climate change information or generally on climate change action in the country. And so the essence is, anytime when someone wants to access climate change information in the country, the information is supposed to be available at the National Climate Change Resource Center. At the county level, and this was also captured under the National Climate Change Action Plan for 2018-2022, county governments are also supposed to, because it's one of the cross-cutting enabling actions under NCAP, they're supposed to establish what we call community education business, community education business and information centers, generally also to be like a one-stop shop of climate change information in the country. The government, through the climate change framework policy, is also supposed to put mechanisms for and also to undertake climate change knowledge and communication needs assessments in order to develop appropriate systems and processes for climate-related data. We're also supposed to develop a comprehensive communication strategy, mainly to enhance dissemination of timely, credible, and reliable climate change information and research findings. And so specifically for these are all that the Climate Change Directorate is supposed to undertake in Kenya. Then the framework policy also talks about putting in place mechanisms to gather, document, and also promote application of traditional indigenous knowledge and practices on climate change. And I think this is key, particularly for the VCA partners working in Kenya, particularly in terms of documenting and also disseminating traditional indigenous knowledge. The policy also talks about mainstreaming gender analysis into climate change knowledge and also information management. Those who have been following, particularly the implementation of Kenya's Climate Change Action Plan, the one for 2018-2022. One of the actions there is in terms of having climate change knowledge and information management portal or rather repository, where you can be able to get online portal where you can be able to get climate change information in Kenya. So these envisaged under the National Climate Change Framework Policy. Still, the policy also talks about putting in place a strategy for identifying, refining, and also disseminating climate change knowledge to the public and other stakeholders in Kenya in a format that is easily accessible, and also communities, even rural and urban communities, can be able to understand. The policy also talks about incorporating climate change knowledge into government's implemented public awareness initiatives, including civic education and extension programs. And so even right now, as county governments are doing the third generation CDPs for 2030, 2023, 2027, one aspect, particularly for the now VCA partners working both on communication, but generally on climate action, is to see how issues around climate change knowledge can be integrated or incorporated into the CDPs, but even through the National Climate Change Action Plan, which it's updating, is currently ongoing. The policy also talks about collaborating with the private sector in terms of incorporating climate change knowledge into advocacy and public awareness raising programs. Under the Climate Change Act 2016, the Climate Change Directorate has so far also developed regulations. There's a regulation on Climate Change Act, public participation, publicness and also public participation regulation, which mainly talks about how we can be able to access climate change information, and also in terms of just generally aspects of public participation when it comes to climate change in Kenya. The policy also talks about facilitating the establishment and operation of a national climate change information hub, and also clearinghouse to generate, coordinate, collect, store and retrieve and also disseminate reliable, high quality and up-to-date data and information. And so this is why we have the national why we have National Climate Change Resource Center at Dagoretti corner in the Kenya Meteorological Department. So this mainly the role that the National Climate Change Resource Center is supposed to play in terms of generally collecting climate change information and also having like a one-stop shop of climate change information in Kenya. When you look at Kenya's National Adaptation Plan, the 2015-2013, there are specific mid-term, both medium-term actions and also short-term actions, specifically talking about aspects of, particularly on public awareness. The first one is that the adaptation plan talks about increasing awareness of climate change impacts on communities, both at the county, across the 47 counties, the agriculture sector, the livestock sector, the tourism sector, and also population and housing. The National Adaptation Plan captures various sectors in the country, but there are some specific aspects that generally touches on awareness, public participation, and also on awareness in the education sector, tourism sector, livestock, and also in the agriculture sector. Then at the same time, it also talks about developing and implementing a public awareness mechanism on climate change adaptation. The adaptation plan also talks about designing appropriate education materials with climate change issues. It also talks about promoting awareness on climate change impacts. This is mainly under the water sector, but also generally creating awareness for climate opportunities that both women and youth can be able to access. So there are various actions, and these are specifically medium-term actions in the NAP, that's the National Adaptation Plan, public participation, and also on awareness. When you go through the National Climate Change Action Plan, and it's particularly the second NCAP, the 2018-2022, we have cross-cutting enabling actions. And one of the cross-cutting enabling actions is capacity, knowledge management and capacity building, capacity development. And there's some specific action that directly touches on issues around public awareness, public participation, and also on generally climate change communication. The first one, which is also captured under the policy framework in establishing the National Climate Change Resource Center, in terms of operating a publicly accessible National Climate Change Resource Center. So this is a key cross-cutting enabling action under the second NCAP. The other one, which is still also an enabling action, is on promoting community education, business and information centers in select counties. The Ministry of Environment and Forestry, and I think also the Samburu County government, have so far developed one in Samburu County called Lesidai Community Education Business and Information Center. But under the NCAP, it's envisaged that other counties will also be able to establish one-stop shop of climate change information at the county level. Another important cross-cutting enabling action, and I think this is key, particularly when Kenya is establishing the third National Climate Change Action Plan for 2023-2027, is in terms of developing, is in terms of public awareness and engagement strategy, because NCAP calls for developing and operationalizing a public awareness an engagement strategy that highlights outreach to both politicians, media, youth, persons with disability, and also marginalized communities. This will be key, particularly for VCA during the establishment of the third NCAP, to see how we can be able to ensure that the public awareness and engagement strategy, the VCA is also able to influence the process of developing the public awareness and engagement strategy. Another important cross-cutting enabling action that directly touches also on information is on climate information services. And this is mainly in terms of formation of all the ensuring that all the 47 counties have climate information services, which risks, legal and also policy framework when it comes to particularly on communication and also knowledge brokering. Some interesting aspects or what's happening in the country, particularly when it comes to mainstreaming of climate change. The Ministry of Environment and Forestry currently has a guideline for mainstreaming climate change in the curriculum at all levels of education and training. Then last year, this is something that has not yet been launched. The Ministry of Environment and Forestry developed the National Climate Change Learning and Awareness Strategy, which is key when it comes to climate change awareness in the country. The awareness strategy is for 2021 to 2030. Challenge is in terms of implementation, but the awareness strategy mainly talks about has prioritized 5 main sectors in the country in terms of awareness and learning and awareness. This is the environment sector, education sector, the WASH, that's water and sanitation, energy and transport, and energy and transport, and also environment. Then at the same time, there are also 3 cross-cutting enabling actions, which are key, particularly for VCA partners. This is on gender, youth and gender. Then we have public participation, and also there's the capacity building. So I think this is key in terms of just generally sharing climate change information in the country. Last year during COP26, and this also touches still on communication, countries agreed on the Glasgow Work Program on Action for Climate Empowerment. This is a 10-year program, particularly in terms of when you're talking about Article 12 of the Article 12 of the Paris Agreement and Article 6 of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This is mainly when you're talking about education, training, public participation, public access to climate change information, and also public awareness, and generally on cooperation. So it's key, particularly when you're talking about these aspects. And right now, even for example, country, as we head to COP27, there are also various aspects, for example, that Kenya is prioritizing when it comes to action for climate empowerment. And this also captures issues around public participation, public awareness, public access to climate change information, training, and also education. Thank you. Back to you, Karen.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bob, so much for that interesting presentation. If anybody has any questions or comments for Bob, please put them into the chat and we'll address them there. I see Rose has a comment that is posted in the chat as well. So, Bob, if you can see that, or I'll read it out. It says, I agree with you that implementation of policies has been a challenge in Kenya. Yesterday, during our stakeholder engagement meeting, lack of public education and awareness around issues of climate change came out strongly. In Siaya, as much as the forest cover is low, people are planting eucalyptus near water bodies, which has led to reduced water levels. And this is as a result of limited awareness on the correct tree species to be planted. Both the national and county government should roll out serious sensitization and awareness creation, even as the president advised to plant trees.
And maybe just to add from that comment, and this is important for VCA, as Kenya will be developing the 3rd National Climate Change Action Plan. It's important for us as VCA partners to see how can we be able to ensure particularly the cross-cutting enabling actions and capacity and knowledge management and capacity development. How can we be able to influence the process and also ensure that issues around public awareness, public participation, access to climate change informations, at least are also prioritized under the cross-cutting enabling actions and the knowledge management and capacity development.
Great. Thanks so much, Bob. Anyone else who would like to pose a question or a comment? If you'd like to raise your hand, please do so. And then you can, voice your comment as well. Okay. Thanks, everyone. So now what we'll do is we'll move on to the next presentation, which is given by Professor Kioko Ireri. And this is about the basics of news writing, feature writing, and story framing. So, Professor, I give the floor to you to do your presentation.
Thank you, Karen, and welcome to everyone. Welcome to my presentation on basics of news writing and story framing. Could I share my?
Yes, you should be able to.
Is it visible now?
Yes, it is. You just need to put it onto presenter mode.
Where is that?
Okay, so right at the bottom right corner, the tools, next to the one that looks like a book, that's the one.
Oh.
There we go, perfect.
Yeah, I would like to talk about how do we within the context of climate change, how do we write stories, because the editors, the journalists, the media, there is a way they how they operate in such a way. If your story has to appear in the news, either as a feature, as a news article, then it has to meet some criteria, some conventions of the news writing, and which the gatekeepers or the editors, which they look into for consideration. And these are things which the stakeholders, the people who are involved in the issues of climate change, they need to understand, because you may be having great ideas, very compelling stories about climate change, but you don't know how to prepare a story, or you don't know how to sell the story to, how to pitch the story to the editor. So these are some of the basics which I would like to we look into in this presentation. And my presentation will cover 8 aspects. What is news? Components of news, news values, the 5 W's and Y and H, not Y, sorry. The lead, the inverted pyramid, story framing, and attribution in story writing. So obviously, the stakeholders, people involved in issues of climate change, whether they are coming up with the solutions, policy making, they would like this information to reach the general public and also the policymakers and other important players in climate change. So, like I say, news is information about a break from the normal flow of events. For example, if a cyclone hits Mombasa, it disrupts the normal life in Mombasa County, then that is news. And people who use the information to make sound decisions about their lives, because their lives will be interrupted by cyclones which are of course, a phenomenon of climate change. I would like to talk about the news values. This is very, very important when you're writing, either you're preparing a press release to the newsrooms or whatever you want to communicate to the public. And these are some of the conventions which journalism works within, and which determine which stories will appear or will see the light of the day. So these are some of the factors you need to understand when you are preparing maybe a press release, you are generating a story idea to know. And the first one is timeliness. Your story has to be timely. You cannot send to the newsroom a press release about an event which took place 2 weeks ago. I can tell you, definitely nobody will consider that it's time barred. So it has to be immediate. So you need to observe timeliness. So that's one of the criteria which the gatekeepers use to accept a story, to run it or decline. The other aspect you can think about when you are writing a story is what's the likely impact? How many people are going to be affected? This is something which the editors and other gatekeepers will weigh in to see. Do they need to run a story about a climate change which has just affected 1 person, 2 people, or which is affecting 300 people? So we need to see the impact, the consequence is something you can consider when you are generating a story for publication or to share with the public. Obviously, stories of climate change can involve people who are prominent in society, maybe the Secretary General of the United Nations talking about climate change, the president giving a policy, a position of a country, and institutions which are involved on issues of climate change. So you can think your story to present it for publication as a news release from a perspective of prominence. This story involves a major player, a big person in society. The other very common value is conflict. And of course, we know in the topic of climate change is a topic which is very contentious, involving very many players where they have differences, antagonism, differing opinions. And for example, I think ahead of the COP27, we know there is a conflict between the developed nations, or the highest producers of carbon, and the developing countries on issues of climate finance, who should bear the cost. There are all those differences. That's a conflict way of looking at the story, and this is an area which journalists and editors are very, very much interested in. And also, the people who are generating ideas, you can exploit the power, the idea of conflict to raise the issue of climate change. Of course, the other one is something.
How are you?
Hello?
I need to go and buy the video. You can check with the laptop.
It's safe over there. It's gonna pressure.
Is it okay? I proceed.
Yes, you may.
All right, thank you. Then we have the unusual, that is deviation from the expected. Currency, then relevance. Something going on, a phenomenon, a situation on climate going on. You can capitalize on that. Of course, the human interest in as far as stories of climate changes are big news values. For example, the things to do with evoking emotions, sympathy, empathy to the people being affected by climate change. That's a way which can determine whether your story is going to run or not. And of course, proximity, how close is the problem of climate change to you? the people you are targeting. We in Kenya, are we interested on issue of climate change in Brazil? Do you see any relevance? So what about climate change in Lake Victoria? I think that would be more close home and very of high interest to Kenyans. Then the next slide, I'll talk about the 5 W's and H, not Y, as indicated earlier. When you write your story, it must have these elements of who is involved. For example, if it is on COP27, who are the major players? Who is being involved in the story? Where is it happening? Where are the cyclones happening? What is happening? What is happening is floods have killed people in Msambweni, in Kwale County. When did it happen? So don't write a press release which does not say when the event, when the problem, when the news event happened. We need that one to be included. Then some other stories would like to know why. Why did that happen? Why did that happen? And there's some stories also will look at how did it happen? How did the climate change happen? How did the floods happen? The other thing I'll talk to is about the lead of a story. The lead is the first intro, the first paragraph of a story. This is very, very important in journalism. This is very important in communication because the lead carries the most important part of the story. It gives the highlight of what is contained in the entire story. So ALIN should be done in a way it captures the main idea of what you want to communicate to the readers, to the listeners. There can be two types of leads. Is direct lead. Direct lead is mostly for straight news. For example, if a number of people have died because of flooding, that one is straight news. You just report right away what is happening. But there is also delayed lead. This is where you entice the reader or listener into the story by hinting at its contents. This is majorly for features, where you want to produce an in-depth story covering a phenomenon like climate change. So an intro or the lead must contain some of the 5 W's, but not all of them. So at least in the intro, we would like to know who is involved, where, and when. At least those three must be captured in the introduction of the first paragraph of your story. Then there's something in news writing we call the inverted pyramid. The inverted pyramid is how you organize your story. And of course, the first paragraph or the lead must be the most important information, followed by the most, second most, third most, fourth most, fifth most, all the way down. That is why we call it an inverted pyramid in news writing. You must. So when you're deciding to write a press release for media, the media would like to see a press release which follows the inverted pyramid structure, but not where you have buried the most important aspect of the story at the bottom. That is not inverted pyramid. So you need to organize your ideas, your thoughts, and the flow of the story following the inverted pyramid structure. Then I'll move to framing in a news because whether in climate change, whether in public relations, whether you're writing a press release, the power of framing cannot be ignored. How you frame a story will determine how it is received. There is a way you frame a story to receive huge public outrage, public support, immediate intervention from the government and other policy makers. So framing is something which communicators exploit maximally to the benefit of passing the information to the relevant stakeholders. Obviously, a news framing comes from theory, framing theory, which is the most, one of the biggest theories in mass communication and the most researched in communication field. So a frame is a central organizing idea or a storyline that provides meaning to unfolding stream of events. Central organizing idea, a theme. So wherever you sit down to generate a story idea, I want to go and write a feature, you have to understand, to know what's your central organizing idea, what's your story about, what's the theme about. You need to have that in mind. Then there are more explanations about framing is placing information in a unique context so that certain elements of the issue can get a greater allocation of individuals' cognitive resources. Yes, because we know framing theory is a media effects theory. So how stories are framed, how stories are portrayed in the news, they have impact, they have effects on the public, on the people who are consuming the news. And that is why I say framing is a very powerful tool for advocacy, for public relations, for politicians, for climate change advocacy, and many other. So frame is what unifies information into a package that can influence audiences, of course, media effects. Frames are conceptual tools which individuals rely on to convey, interpret, and evaluate. These conceptual tools are metaphors, exemplars, catchphrases, depictions, and the visual images. I'll be talking more about the last explanation in the next few slides. So here there is an analogy about framing. Some artists take a great care of how they present their work, choosing a frame that they hope will help audiences see the image in just the right way. Therefore, journalists often subconsciously engage in essentially the same process when they decide how to describe the climate change debates or events. They choose images and words that have the power to influence how audiences interpret and evaluate issues and policies. Categories of frames. We have two main areas, categories of framing, how you can frame your story, how you can think, how to frame your story. The first one is episodic. Episodic focuses on an individual telling a personal story. For example, maybe a farmer explaining to a journalist or being reported, talking about how his crops have dried up because there's no rains, because of crop failure, because of other vagaries of weather, which are associated with climate change. So when this individual is talking in the media, that is episodic. The other category is thematic. This is where the media or interested parties can push an issue from mathematic point of view. Thematics looks at the larger society context, not an individual. For example, if we don't take drastic measures against climate change, maybe we will not have food security in the next 10 years. So we are looking at a wider context, a wider lens, but not an individual. And thematic is very powerful because a lot of policies, interventions, and other measures they are done from a thematic point of view. It's very difficult for a government to develop a policy on an individual because an individual has no food. An individual, his house has been submerged by floods. Unless, it's a bit difficult, but the government and other will always come up with the policies which are thematic, or they look at the larger society interest, but not an individual. So, however, your story can contain both episodic and thematic. And that is why me as a scholar, one of the things I look at when I'm analyzing and researching on some of these reporting is, I would like to see in these climate change stories, how has the Kenyan media been reporting the climate change? Is it from episodic or thematic? So if I find a lot of stories are more thematic, then I think I understand that the media is pushing a national agenda, a national context to have come up with interventions which help the nation, the larger nation, but not an individual. But when it is episodic, then you ask yourself, why is the media focusing on so much on episodic framing? Maybe it is more dramatic, it evokes emotions and many other aspects of human interest. In framing, we normally have 5 generic frames, which the media and stakeholders, like the people involved in pushing issues on climate change, which they can focus on. One of the generic frames is the conflict. This is where we have a tug of war or differences of opinion involving 2 groups or many groups. And for example, I've given the example of the developed nations, which are the major producers of carbon, versus least developed industrialized countries, which bear the most consequences of climate change. That debate which is going on, even I know it will be very prominent in COP27, is conflict. And the media do exploit that conflict to do a story. The people involved, the stakeholders also can exploit that. The other one is economic consequences. The issues of climate change, there's no doubt you can see them from an economic consequences. You can frame your story from an economic perspective. Attribution of responsibility is where we see who is responsible for problems of climate change. Who is responsible? Is it China? Is it the United States? And also the other aspect of attribution is who offers the solution. So it carries 2 aspects: who is to blame and who offers the solution. Human interest, of course, this is a frame which focuses on human interest, empathy, evoking a lot of sympathy. For example, if you are reporting how individuals are affected by floods, their homes have been swept away, their crops have also been swept away. This is a human interest story, and it has a lot of also some huge impact. And then morality is where maybe some people seek divine intervention, God. They evoke the name of God to solve the issues of climate change. Maybe religious leaders or some very religious people who who see the issue of climate change from a divine intervention or from a God's perspective. For example, I know in the last few weeks in Kenya, I have seen a lot of things on social media from Kenyans asking God to provide rains because the climate change is real. Then, yes, and when I talk about the generic news frames, I would like to mention that generic news frames, they apply in every topic. If we go to a war, there will be all these generic frames will be there. if we go to politics, we can also look at this, these frames, and when we go to climate change, they also appear there in a prominent manner. But when we come to issue-specific frames, these are the ones which are specifically focusing on climate change. Things like resilience building, climate innovations, climate policy and governance, climate finance, environmental concern, food security. These are specifically for the topic of climate change. So when the stakeholders, people with the solutions on climate change and other stakeholders, when you are thinking about a story, to push a certain story in the media, you can think, do you think I want my story to focus on the issue of climate finance? For example, I know many African countries, they are now pushing to be compensated because they believe they are not the originators of the problems associated with the climate change. There's something we call valence framing. Valence framing is where a story can be reported in 3 ways: in a positive manner, neutral, or negative. So, for example, when we are coming up to amplify the solutions by local people on initiatives they have put in place about climate change, that's positive reporting. We'll be framing our story from a positive perspective. Then a negative perspective is like the consequences of climate change, crop failure, food security, and so on and so on and so on. That's a negative point of view. Neutral is where the media reporting does not take any sign of the tone, positive or negative. It remains neutral. However, for researchers like me, we focus on mostly on positive and negative because they are more influential. They have more impact on the news consumers and audiences more than just neutral framing. So to conclude, you can use some devices to emphasize your story idea or the theme you're pushing. For example, Scoot Strike for climate, don't be a fool, make earth cool, be nice, save the ice, global warming and sales. These are some of the slogans which you can employ as a way of being creative and passing your message to the relevant audience. So they help convey the central idea in a news frame. They help convey central idea in a news frame. The idea about story idea is very, very important because this is where many people lose it. If you don't get it right in the story idea, then your story will not go anywhere. You'll not achieve the objective of what you want to communicate or what you want the journalist to communicate for you. So a story idea is like a thesis statement in academic writing. Every story must have a central idea or message. The body of the story must reflect the central idea. And what we are saying is here, you cannot say my central idea, I'm going to focus on climate finance, becomes your theme. But when we read the whole story, we don't find anything about climate finance. So it means there's a disconnect, and it means your story idea has not been supported. That is why when you come up with a story idea, you must have enough data evidence or information which will hold it up or which will support it until you finish writing your story. So the story must, so the central idea should tell your audience what the story is all about and help guide your writing and keep your argument focused. A good story, a good central idea is focused, not broad. Yeah, you cannot afford to go all over. You need to narrow down to a certain small area which you focus on. The central idea must be very clear, explicit, yes, because you're communicating. You're communicating, so your idea must be very, very clear and explicit, so that there's no confusion, it's not ambiguous, it's easily understandable. A good idea, as I have said, there must be enough data evidence. So don't say I want to write about climate resilience. Then after 2 paragraphs, there's nothing more about climate resilience. You move to other areas. It means your story idea was not mature enough to have enough evidence for support. And of course, your story idea must be original. The other thing I will speak about, the last one is second last slide is attribution in stories. Attribution is very important when we are writing stories. When you're developing your press release for the media, we need to know who is attributed to the story. And I remember in June, I was a chief judge for climate change stories for Africa. And one of the major problems we saw in those stories were they were poorly attributed. You write a very good feature, a very serious feature about the effects, consequences of climate change, but there's poor attribution. It's like you are the one owning the ideas about what you're writing, but unless you're writing a news opinion, which you can put your own ideas. So attribution, you need to bring many players, experts, victims, general public into your story and try to balance them. And if, for example, let's say your story is antagonism between the North and the South on climate change financing, we need to have a balance. Make sure you have enough attribution from the developed nations and also enough attribution from the less developed countries. So you cannot write a story without attributing it to some people, some institutions, etc. Sources play a significant role in the framing of stories. Selection of sources is part of the final product of the story. Use of sources influence public opinion. And source material is the backbone of news reporting, providing evidence and lending legitimacy and credibility to the story. Yes. When you bring many attributions from various sources, your story gains a lot of legitimacy, credibility, and authority. But when you just use one source or 2 sources, your story lacks credibility and authority to be believable. The other thing which we need to look into when you are writing stories for climate change is the role of the visuals. So don't just write a story on the text, and if there's no photograph, if there's no some graphic illustrations. So this is an area which needs to be exploited, and which is very, very important, because as I am saying here in point number 3, visuals enjoy superiority over text, what we call picture superiority. News that really matters are what is visually prominent. Can you imagine a known person, an illiterate person? An illiterate person, how will an illiterate person understand a problem of climate change in the news? They'll be not able to read a news article. But when you show them in the television news, cows dying in Garissa, cows dying in Wajir, you make them understand the climate change. But you cannot tell them to go and read the story, and they don't know how to read. So what I'm saying here is when we are writing the stories and generating ideas about climate change, we need to bring in the aspect of visuals. They are very powerful in communication. They send the message in a stronger manner than just the text, which are more of people who are literate to know to read. And also, text, they require a lot of what you call cognitive resources. You need to think people are not well educated, they have no time to think about a phenomenon. They want to see the visuals, what is happening, and they say, oh, and they get the message of what is going on. Thank you very much. I'll stop there. Back to you, Karen.
Thank you, Professor, for that very informative presentation. It was really helpful to learn about the different types of news, such as direct and those that are hinting at the story. And also it's important to know, how a story is framed, because it determines how it is also received, which I think is also a very important factor for the work that we're doing within VCA. So thank you for that. If anybody has any questions or comments, again, please put it in the chat or you can raise your hand. Okay, so what we'll do now, if nobody has any questions or comments, we will now just have a short body break, about 5 minutes, just to give you a chance to go grab some water or stretch your legs and so forth. So I'm going to put a countdown timer on, and we'll come back after the break. Okay, great, everyone. I hope that you managed to stretch your legs and get something, a refreshment to take you through to the next part of our session. So the next session will be on, let me just see, will be about fact-checking. And our colleague, Nyakerario or Catherine will be presenting that session for us. So I hand it over to you. Please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nyakerario, but we have Catherine written there. Just a bit of some hitches with power outage here. But I'm glad that I'm in this space with all of you. And I'm very excited that the speaker before me, Professor Kioko, spoke about storytelling and how to structure your story, because fact-checking is also storytelling, and especially the inverted pyramid way of writing a story, and the 5W and H, which I will focus on in this presentation. But you will also have to allow me to switch off my video, because I'll be playing around with tabs and that will be easy for me, but I'll be having it on and off. Yes, so let's start. Also, please, Karen, enable me to share my screen.
Okay, let me just check. Yeah, you should be able to share your screen now.
Yes, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, and if you could put it on presenter mode, that'll be great.
Okay. Okay. So fact-checking climate change, and I must say that we've really encountered a lot of false information around climate change and all that. And one that might resonate with all of us is a video that has been going around social media of cows drowning. I think that video started circulating around last year, and people are saying that is in Turkana and all that. But also there's another image that's going around, and guys are saying that is Kajiado, and the situation with drought in that area, but that is all wrong. So there are three main ways on how misinformation manifests, that is videos, images, and manipulated data. And we will go through all of that in this presentation. But one thing that I must mention is that videos carry a lot of misinformation because they carry a lot of content, and people tend to believe what they can see than what they can hear or read. So it is easy to share misinformation using a video or an image with a caption that is misleading and all that than you can with manipulated data. But all that is just how misinformation manifests. So in false information, we have misinformation, malinformation, and disinformation. So misinformation is false information that is shared regardless of its intention. So it's like I might be the youngest in this meeting, so I'll have to throw my parents under the bus just a bit. So it's just how sometimes our parents share forward WhatsApp messages. They don't want to harm you, they don't want to taint your name or something or someone, but it's because they have believed. Yes, Tiffany. So yes, I think they've just believed that whatever they have seen or read is true, and they want to share it with you and all that. So that is misinformation. Malinformation is information that is true, but it is shared to taint someone's image. And no, sorry, that is yes, that is malinformation. And disinformation, unlike misinformation, is misleading information that is shared deliberately. So sometimes, but also I think this is where I'll focus on greatly on disinformation, on how people manipulate images and videos and data and our website links just to share a narrative. And I must confess that the climate space is a very, very political space. I have had a chance to produce 2 stories on climate change and climate action, climate policies, and the climate space as a whole is a very political space that is being fought, and we understand why, especially when we start talking about global north and global south imbalance in policies and implementation of these policies, and also now that we have the COP27 in Africa. So, I mean, there's a lot, and also, I'm sorry if there's someone from Coca-Cola here, we know what's happening between Coca-Cola and Coca-Cola sponsoring COP27 or being a very big sponsor in COP27. So that answers why we will start seeing a lot of disinformation around COP27 and all that. So the tools that we use most of the time is InVid, image verification. These are just the basics, but I know it's a place we can all start. And also, as Professor Kioko said, I mean, in storytelling, you have to have your facts. And by having your facts, you have to, I mean, use and learn how to use these tools and techniques, because you don't want to be having a great story, but you've used the wrong image, the wrong data, you've interviewed the wrong people, and all that. So one of the biggest tool, which I also refer to as a trick tool, is InVid, image verification. It's a plugin extension that you can add to your Chrome extension, and it will give you a wide range of an opportunity to run your image or video on a wide range of search engines, that is Yandex, Bing, Google, Tinai, and all that. So it helps you verify where an image or a video has appeared before. So let's say like an image was uploaded like, let's say 3 years ago, but again, it has resurfaced now, or in context that it's showing the situation in Kajiado and all that. If you run such an image on Google reverse image search or Yandex or somewhere else, it will show you how early that image was published, who published it, what was happening, and all that. And then also that again takes me back to the previous presentation that you had, the 5W and H So what was happening in that image? Who published it? When was it published? You know, all that. So you get to answer your 5W and H even when you're doing your fact checking. So that is one. So in-vid image verification takes care of images and videos at the same time. And also it gives you an opportunity to check an image or a video's metadata. So metadata is the data that is attached to an image. So sometimes you can't really know when an image was published on the internet, but when you check its metadata, it will tell you this is when it was published. This is the tool that was used to, rather, this is the camera that was used to take it and all that. But also for metadata, I will advise that you use photo forensics because it gives better information than InVid. And then now the second one is WHOIS and DNSlytics. So WHOIS and DNSlytics, these two tools serve the same thing. They help us check our websites, the veracity of a website. So I'll give an analogy. We have a drought crisis in Kenya, and our government says it has already set aside 2 billion to aid, humanitarian, humanitarian organizations to feed people and all that. But we will need more money, and sometimes even the money that has been set aside, we all know how our governments and the brokers and the people playing around such funds, we know what happens. So soon we are going to see links show up, and they'll be asking for your details, and they say, we are trying to collect funds to help women and girls in Kajiado, in Turkana, in Marsabit, and all that. But most of the time, such links are just links that are used to collect your personal data. And you might be selling out your data because, again, we all know that data is the new gold. We saw all this during COVID. When we had COVID, we had websites going up saying that we are collecting funds. Do you want free data? Do you want free shopping voucher from supermarkets and all that? But all that was just phishing links. So WHOIS and DNSlytics helps you check the veracity of a website. And by checking the veracity of a website, you copy paste the link of that website on WHOIS or DNSlytics. And I must say that for a more public website, or rather for a more public organization, they have physical address. And if they have a physical address, they also have a website. And in their website, if you check with WHOIS or DNSlytics, they must be providing their IP address. And that should be a very big red flag. If you check a website and their IP address is hidden, but they claim to be an organization that has been around for a long time. Why would you hide your IP address, your physical address, and all that if you're in operation? And yeah, that is something else. And then we have geolocation, and finally we have web archive. I'll talk about geolocation towards the end of this presentation, but I must talk about web archive. I should have actually mentioned web archive before we started, but that's okay. Again, sorry. Let me just show you how WHOIS looks like. Just let me know if you can see my screen. Okay, so this is how WHOIS looks. So what you do, if you can see my cursor, this is where you come and paste your link, just right here, so that.
Sorry. Yeah, we're still on the page which shows tools and techniques.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Just a minute. can you see it now?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Okay. So now, if you have a link that you're trying to check, what you do, if you can see my cursor, you come and paste it here at this search tab, and then you run it. It will give you details of the IP address, when it was registered, when the website, who's the website host, when is it expiring, and all that. It gives like all the details about that organization, and also to just back up your research. Also run a check on run a check on the legit website. So let's say, I'll give an analogy. Let's say there's a link that is circulating and it claims to be from the UN, but UN's official website. So you can compare the two just to check their details, and also just check on their website to see if they've mentioned anything about collecting funds or giving funds towards people who have been affected by climate change, that is drought, floods, and all that. I'll show you again how Web Archive looks like, and then I'll mention what it does. So this is Web Archive. I should have started with Web Archive, but this is how it looks. So Web Archive, what Web Archive helps us as journalists is to save pages or tweets or Facebook posts or YouTube posts before they're deleted, so that when someone has deleted, you have a copy. Because if you want to go after, rather if you want to report about something and you don't have it, then it doesn't count. So once you see something on the internet that you suspect to be false, the first thing you do is to save it offline. So this is where you just copy the link of what you're looking into, and you save it. It will give you another link. So the link that is generated, that is what you use, just in case the tweet or the Facebook post or the link or the website link is deleted from the internet. As I said, we'll look at geolocation a bit later, but let's look at data manipulation. And I'm going to just target people who love reading reports and all that. So there are two. If you can check on our, if you can check on our website at Pigafirimbi, you'll see most of the fact checks that we've done around data that has been manipulated, and these two are one of them. So there's one that claimed China is responsible for twice as many emissions as America and Europe combined. But, well, I mean,
Hi, we sort of lost your audio.
sorry. Okay.
But you may go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can. Yes, we can hear you, but you can give it 1 more minute for your presentation.
Okay. Okay. So as I said, it is easy to convince people about something when you say twice as much or more than and all that, or even to use numbers. So like this one, they say that China is responsible for twice as many emissions as America and Europe combined. Such information, it will be nice if you check the data around it. What is the latest data? What is it saying? And you have to use credible sources when you're looking at data. And also sometimes it is advisable, not even sometimes, all the time it is advisable for you to reach out to experts who have the authority in whatever space you're trying to get your information from, so that they can clarify on all this information. So we've looked at videos, we've looked at images. So this is the image I've been telling you that's been going around, but apparently this is not true. This image is not from 2022, it's from 2017. But it has also been, it resurfaced again in 2021 and again in 2022. So finally, let's look at geolocation and how we can track fires, how we can track generally fires, but Google Earth doesn't give that. But there's an additional tool that NASA has created which shows fires. So it could be fires by war, caused by war and conflicts, or naturally occurring fires, or fires caused by logging or guys burning charcoal. And I'll just show you how NASA farms, so it's called NASA farms, how NASA farms looks. And apparently, when I was looking at this yesterday, there was fire in, there was fire in Karura, but it's just a small bit that should not be something it shouldn't be alarming. Sorry, I hope you guys can see my screen. So this is how NASA Farms looks like. So NASA Farms is the satellite imagery tool that NASA has created to help you know, guys just to look around fires. Just a minute, let me pause sharing so that we'll be able to. Minute, try.
At least like 25 minutes.
Yeah, let me just show you. Sorry, let me just show you how it looks, because I think since I'm using my colleague's laptop, it might take a while before I log in. It requires also your details before you can get access to this tool, but it's a free tool. But let me show you.
Hi, yeah, thanks for this. I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up your presentation. and move on to the next one, handled by Simon Wachira.
Okay, sorry. Okay, that's okay. But all these, I hope I can share all these links with you, Karen, so that you can share with the guys on this call, so that they can just look around the tools and techniques. It's easier if you try it than just hearing it from someone. It's easier when you try and see how the tool looks and how it works. But it's been amazing. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. Perhaps you could share the links if they are in the chat. But yeah, happy to share them after the session as well. So thank you so much for that. Yeah, we'd like to move on now to the next presentation by our colleague Simon from ThinkOut. And his presentation will be handling rethinking, persuasion in climate change storytelling, Kenyan context and opportunities. So Simon, if you are ready, you can go ahead.
Good afternoon. I presume you can hear me. Let me be sure if you can hear me, please wave.
Yes,
Professor.
Clear.
Great. Let me try and share my screen. Share screen. Great, this one. Share. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to move pretty fast into persuasion because it's very important to really understand how persuasion is important in terms of what we are actually doing. You'll see the front part of my presentation later, which is basically my bio. I don't want to deal with that. But I want to actually talk about persuasion in climate change storytelling, because I want to really convince you that there's a real battle for attention that we people who are trying to tell stories and people who are actually trying to amplify a certain cause already have. And we have to work smartly and creative to get attention and to influence, inform, and persuade, then influence. That's how it works. Actually, even advertising works like that. You get informed, you get persuaded, then you're influenced to act. Because we're doing this to really influence things, influence policy, and change this country. Let me actually, I want to remove my video. Okay, I think, let me stop video. Okay. I want to really talk about how can we persuade through storytelling for impact. What do we need to do? What sort of capacity do we need? And what are the opportunities? And do you know that on average, an ordinary person gets over 5,000 brand messages every day? And these are carefully packed messages. You wear a certain brand of a watch, you have a certain phone brand, your TV, you're seeing adverts, you're actually walking around billboards. And do you know that the average person spends 147 minutes or 2 hours, 47 minutes in a day in 2022, according to Global Social Media Usage Report? I'm sure you're wondering how much time you may have lost, quote unquote, if you're one of those enthusiasts of social media. But really, we consume a lot of messages from social media platforms, from mainstream media platforms. We come across individuals who are personal brands in their own way. So believe you me, there's clearly a real race for attention. So we are competing with politicians, musicians, evangelists. We are competing with socialists who are working very hard and posting photos for you to see, advertisers, and many other people. Do you see these people? Yes, you can. This is, you know her, Vera Sidika, this is President, this is Raila, this is Nganga, Pastor Nganga. These are people who are already known and who push messages that you consume. We are trying to push climate change messages because we are telling the world time has come for us to act. We're also competing with these people who are also pushing their own messages and causes and agendas. So attention is very important. And so how do we get this attention? Persuasion works miracles. Maybe to also understand how this gets amplified is that Kenya have preference for more political news. Entertainment and celebrity news also attract huge coverage. What is the opportunity that we can actually get here? We have to rethink storytelling to inform, persuade, and influence. In the age of gadgets, stories, by the way, can be told by anyone. The last thing that I really want to discourage is for us as practitioners within this space to really say, okay, we have our communications person who is telling stories from the field. So I'll not tell stories because there's someone who actually does that. But I want to tell you that some of those stories that you're consuming on media are actually coming from very ordinary people. We recently covered a story because I'm currently running a program under VCA covering Massabit and pushing a lot of those drought stories. Tomorrow we are launching a campaign on drought and you'll see it on media. There was a story about hypothermia and how we lost hundreds of thousands of goats. Those stories were actually told by very ordinary people who had a camera. So I really want to encourage you, whoever you are in whichever organization, there are opportunities for you to capture stories within your vicinity. That is very important. Let me tell you something that you already know. You know, initially, climate change was framed in scientific language, and I'm sure you may have come across some of these terms. Ozone layer. In fact, I remember when I first heard about climate change, I was hearing about ozone layer. I was wondering, what is this? There was CO2 emissions, carbon credits, red plus, global warming, CO2 gas. And by the way, we were actually consuming this on TV. And a lot of people were not really getting what this was about. It sounded like a very complex science fiction sort of language. And this message failed to connect climate change with the ordinary person, say Marsabit or Baringo. What then is the role of persuasion? Persuasion is the process by which a person's attitudes or behavior are without duress influenced by communication from other people. You will agree with me that you've been persuaded by marketers. You probably bought a phone because you saw an advert. A politician's made you vote in a certain way, or someone actually pushed you into persuaded you to join a certain faith that you like. Let me show you two different messages, and you will answer in your heart how persuaded you are by these two different messages. Let me talk about scientific reporting. And I'm like reading news. If global energy demand continues to grow rapidly, and we meet it mostly with fossil fuels, human emissions of carbon dioxide could reach 17 billion tons per year or more by the end of the century. Atmospheric carbon dioxide could be 800 ppm or higher, conditions not seen on Earth for close to 50 million years. According to Paris Agreement, member states committed to limiting global warming to well below 2 degrees centigrade, preferably to 1.5 degrees centigrade, compared to pre-industrial levels. Now think about an audience that you actually want to consume this, and you want them to change behavior. I'm saying this because we love jargons in this sector, and sometimes these jargon don't communicate. And if you are trying to inform and persuade and influence, then we have to be wary of some of this language. Let me share a different human interest angle. Sadia from Turbi, North Horr, Marsabit County, stares at the carcasses of her dead camel. She has lost 10 camels in the last 6 months. She only has 2 left. This is the worst drought season that I have ever experienced in my life. I have lost all the sweat and hope that I had, even my means of survival. I have lost this wealth gained in 4 generations. How will I educate my children? Ponders Sadia. Like other Horn of Africa countries, Kenya is bearing the brunt of climate change effects. You realize one has science, the other one has a human interest connection. I am sure I can bet my this month's salary that you're likely to be persuaded by the story about Sadia than probably about the tons of carbon dioxide, which you probably cannot have context. How then does persuasion in climate change storytelling work? If you don't remember me for anything today, please remember me for this very important diagram. Persuasion works, this is actually according to Aristotle. Persuasion works when you speak to the heart of people. There are people who are persuaded by emotive messages. They are moved. There are people who are convinced when you speak to their heads. Here is where you present logic, proof, reason, statistics, and metaphors. There are people who are convinced by credibility. For instance, you usually see an advert of Sensodyne, which says X number of doctors worldwide endorse this brand. There are people who work when they see a certain endorser who has credibility in a certain space saying this product works for you. So when you're persuading, how do we use this now that we know this is how persuasion works? Heart, mind, and credibility to now push climate change storytelling. Heart is where you speak to people's emotions. I have explained that. Let me not repeat. How do we use tactics in emotive storytelling to really move people or persuade people to act? There's something known as social proof theory, where people tend to imitate others to fit in. For instance, acceptable habits in climate change can be amplified, such as recycling, riding to work. The public and policymakers start taking note. Personal stories are powerful. Distilling climate change stories to the real people in real circumstances works miracles. What is the opportunity for us in this space? We have to ensure that we link climate change stories to human action and climate justice issues, which are not very well being covered. I want to tell you that fear is a stronger emotion than love, according to studies, and that's a famous quote as well. But I want to tell you that when people are consistently bombarded with fear, the mind reframes. I'm sure initially when they were mentioning 10 people have COVID today, you were very worried when those numbers were being read. But at some point it came to 200 and we're saying, oh, hii kitu imekuwa common, watu wameugua. So people can actually get used to some of these messages when even fear can be overused. There's an accident car near Safari Park where they show a real car that got an accident. It shocked us, including me, the first 2 months. But nowadays I realize I don't even notice it. So I also want to encourage people in this sector. Sometimes don't overuse fear because people can actually get used to it. It's one of the challenges that I'm currently making sure that I don't fall into, because I'm really pushing a lot of drought response, drought stories up the north. And I don't want people to get used to wale watu wako na njaa. People are hungry in the north. So let's move to the next page. So fear can be overused. What is currently happening? Drought stories in Kenya have been getting good coverage. The link to climate change has been given to some extent. I'm sure you have seen some stories on rising lake levels, for instance, Lake Bogoria, Lake Nakuru. And there's opportunity for us to reposition the stories with more attention to climate justice issues and climate change. There is opportunity for deeper analyzed stories that VCA members can help. It is called delayed journalism. Sometimes you have what is called before and after stories. Probably it's something you've been doing in the last 1 year. Can you be able to tell stories that are more delayed rather than the usual news cycle? Please tone down on the jargon. I really tell you as a brother and as a friend and as a practitioner in this space and as a comrade in arms. Jargons make people block from what you say. Let's get to the mind. This is a rational argument that convinces rather than moves. For instance, in Kenya, You must have seen the Pango Kando advert in Kenya, where someone was talking about the cost of having a side chick, excuse my French, or a side wife or a side girlfriend when you already have a wife. And someone had a calculator and calculating the actual cost of people who have more than one wife legally. And I'm sure that was a different way of presenting issues about HIV/AIDS. You don't really, that time long ago, people used to get shocked with HIV adverts. And now someone was trying to make an argument. Do you know how expensive it is to have a girlfriend when you already have a wife? Well, I'm not sure. I've not done that, but probably some of you may relate. But in Kenya, most of the stories have taken an emotive angle and have generally been negative. I'm sure you've seen Mother Nature's Rage on NTV. And some of those stories actually also on Drought. But there's opportunity to rethink arguments, especially during this time of COP. For instance, climate change adaptation stories, climate finance. For instance, how are communities adapting to climate change? Are there opportunities in climate change, such as climate finance issues? What is green entrepreneurship and how does it work? Those are some of the story angles that can be told. Look at this real photo that we took in Marsabit of someone in a very dry area who has managed to, through innovation, grow some very nice leafy vegetables. If you haven't eaten lunch today, I'm sure this is very tempting. That's a different narrative. Let's talk about credibility. Credibility is the audience attitude toward or perception of the speaker. Kenya is big with analysts and experts. And use of experts has been used in climate change persuasion. And most of the time, it's the same old experts. I feel there's opportunity for VCA members to get into what is called thought leadership. I want to see new faces, new talk show people showing up. And we can actually also push for opportunity for tracking commitments and implementation of laws. For instance, Climate Change Act 2016, how are we faring? How are we faring with the global international commitments and conventions that Kenya has already signed? We have a dump site here that was declared full over 20 years ago. How are we doing about it? So there are so many stories that we can push with people who are seasoned in this space. And because I know your capacities, and even now become the new faces that we see. It's not the same old analysts that you see. So there's opportunity for this. But I also want to tell you that when you write stories, as Professor has mentioned, I think also being able to bring experts is very convincing and very persuading to say, according to a professor or an certain expert, this and this and this has happened. It's very convincing. So 5 P's of storytelling that I want to really talk about. Make sure you talk about people, place, which Professor mentioned, plot, what is your storyline? What is the purpose? Why are you telling this story? Do you want to stimulate change of action? Who are the players? This is the biggest mistake that nonprofit organizations do. When you get a journalist to go and write your story, and you cannot prove that your organization is involved. So let them say, according to CIM Muungano, let's see linkage to the organization implementing a project or a program. Moving very fast, packaging to persuade, form and content. You have photos are powerful, short clips, GIFs, animation videos, very important because nowadays there's what is called converged media space. You go to a website of the New York Times, you go to a website of The Star, Kenya, Guardian, and you're seeing infographics, you're seeing videos in a website. And initially, a newspaper like New York Times is actually a newspaper, but now you see like it behaves like TV. So there's opportunity to push various forms of content, infographics, animations. And look at that. Look at how powerful photography is. This is a real photo taken 2 months ago by us in Marsabit. You don't really have to explain how women are bearing the effect of climate change and shortage of water and covering long distances. It's not poverty porn. It's not, poverty porn is where you use very negative photos of children with floods in their eyes. This is not poverty porn, but it's a convincing photo, I presume. Okay, this one is also showing the family and in a very dry place and the race to get water. I didn't want to show this, but this is a real photo that we've taken in the last 2 months of Marsabit, but I didn't really want to show this, but I wanted you to see this person whom you don't have to be told is from the northern region of the country, pulling a cow and a bunch of carcasses showing his lost wealth. I don't want to show this, but it's really the reality up the north. If I want now to link this to climate change, probably people can relate. This is how an infographic looks like. Water access is a global crisis. Infographic, by the way, means information graphic. It's where you get a lot of data written in a very long narrative and you summarize it in a pager that people can relate. And you can find 5 paragraphs summarized in 1 page and people really relate to that. A real one is this one of the drought situation in Kenya. This is from the Star, released last week. And you can see 4.3 million Kenyans are food insecure. You can see effect of malnutrition, expectant mothers. And these numbers in one graphic can tell you how is the drought situation in Kenya. I really want to encourage players in this sector to really consider data and infographics because they're very convincing and they are able to summarize very big stories. Some bonus for potential linkages. This Kenya Environmental and Journalists Association, KESJA, this Journalists for Human Rights. This is very active within the National Assembly, where I'm also involved as a consultant. Media for Environment, Science, Health and Agriculture in Kenya, MESHA, Environmental Journalists Society of Kenya, non-profit sector networks. VCA has been inviting us to write stories. I think we can still push these stories. And for those who want to really push what is called thought leadership is where you're able to build a brand and become an expert and be known as an expert in a certain space. Paula Kahombo is known for protection of wildlife. Wangari Maathai was known for protecting trees, yet she was a veterinarian. So you can actually become a thought leader in a certain space. And there are blogs such as Medium, where you can publish. There are also blogs such as even VCA, where you can publish, and LinkedIn, and frame yourself as an expert. Also awards, I want to encourage you, for some who are already working on some of these documentaries and awards, African Climate Change and Reporting, Zimeo was the consultant who designed that, CNN Africa, these are not actually a continental award, CNN Africa Journalists, Society for Environmental Journalists Award, SEJA, Annual Journalism Excellence Awards. So sometimes you may write a story that can actually win you an award or some grant. And nowadays we're encouraging a lot of people who are also crowdsourcing news from across the world to push them the news stories in some of these news platforms. I told you about hypothermia. Let me give an example. What are the other opportunities? You are already working with communities. These communities are seeing things on the ground every day. You don't have to travel to a certain region to get stories from there. You can get communities to use their gadgets wherever they are to capture what they can capture. Maybe these floods in Naivasha or Lake Bogoria. Maybe by the time you live where you live to go to cover the floods, they already will have subsided. And a community member is just on the ground and can take a photo easily. So I also want to really encourage consistent documentation. Don't invite the journalist late into the program. A lot of people do what is called impact reporting after the program is ending. We want you to capture the process so that we can relate the process to the final outcome. Thank you very much. I presume I've learned a thing or two about persuasion, and I hope you'll be able to ably compete with people who are also trying to get people's eyeballs or attention so that we push these climate change stories for impact. If there are any questions, please let me know. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Simon, for that great presentation. It was great to learn about the different topics or terms in climate change, and yeah, to hear that not everyone understood what those terms meant, and also and thank you for going through the 3 aspects of persuasion and how we can use them for storytelling. I know we've gone a little bit over time, and thank you so much to those who have stuck with us through this event. I'd like to just share a short Mentimeter presentation as well, just so you can give your feedback, suggestions, and also what topics you'd like us to cover for future sessions. So just have it for a few minutes on the screen, and it'd be great if you can just take 1 or 2 minutes to add your comments there. Okay, sorry, let me just stop this. Sorry, give me 1 second, everybody. Okay, so I hope everybody can see. So the Mentimeter link has been shared in the chat, if you're wondering how to get to it. So I'll just give it a moment just for it to open. Okay, great. I hope everybody can see it. So it'd be great to hear about your feedback and suggestions and topics. And while we're doing that, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today and for staying with us through the event. Thank you so much to our presenters as well for presenting such engaging and interesting presentations. Also, what we would do in the next few days is to make the recording of this event public, so that you have access to it if you want to watch it again. And also the presentations will be made available for you for download as well. So probably next week, we'll send out a mailer to you all who have attended and registered, so that you have access to these resources. Okay, if nothing comes to mind at this stage, I also encourage you to reach out to myself and the presenters as well on any suggestions that you may have or what you'd like to learn for future sessions. So again, thank you very much for joining us today. It was really great having you all here, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.